Hello and welcome to Module 1, where we're going to look at building your professional brand. Hope you had a good look at the workbook and set your intentions and are ready to get going. Quick overview on what we're going to cover in this one. We're going to talk about knowing yourself. We're going to look at establishing core values, your unique selling proposition or USP, and taking care of number one. So, firstly, what is your personal brand and why does it matter? You might be thinking, this course is about building connections with other people. What do I need to learn about myself for? This is probably the most important step, and it's going to really build the foundation because you can't build relationships with others until you figure out the relationship with yourself, which is arguably the most important relationship of all. You might be thinking, why does it matter? How is it relevant to this course? What a personal brand is going to do, it's going to be the number one differentiator that's going to set you apart from the competition or your coworkers, and it's going to really set the stage to enhance your career. Okay, we're going to look at what makes you you, what you're good at, what you love doing, what you can get paid to do, and how to leverage that to increase your uh, potential for advancement in your career. Okay, let's get going. So, step one to building your personal brand is uncovering your unique identity. What makes you you? So, we're going to spend a little bit of time and do a little bit of self discovery. And what we're looking for here is really trying to understand and get grip on what are your strengths, what are your passions, what do you love doing, what are you good at. When you get into your workbook, there's going to be an exercise where you're able to list things out. You don't have to do it right now. You can take time at the end of the module, and it'll fall into three buckets. One is what you love doing. Two is what you're good at doing, and three is what the construction industry needs. And what we really want to focus on are the ones that overlap, and especially the ones that fall right in the middle that satisfy all three needs. Okay. Part of this too, you're going to look at your skills inventory. So you're going to identify construction related skills and expertise. So in the first part, you looked at, traits in your personality, traits in your life that may not be super applicable to construction. But in this part, you're going to look at the actual technical skills. What training do you have? What experience do you have? And we're going to couple those two together to help strengthen your personal brand and your identity. Okay. And number three is defining your identity. So how do you want to be perceived in the industry? What kind of position do you want to attain? Is it similar to what you're doing now, or is it more of a lateral move? An example of this is if you are a laborer, for example, and you want to work your way up to a different trade or work your way up to a supervisory level. That's one goal you have to keep in mind, and a certain skill set that you're going to have to attain and relationships you're going to have to build to get there. If you're that same laborer and you want to eventually make a lateral move, maybe into the office, project coordinator, project management, that's going to have a different path. So it's really important to identify those goals and traits now that you're going to need to aspire to. Again, we're just covering the information quickly in these slides. What's really going to be important is going through that workbook, writing it down, setting the intention, and making it happen. Okay, so step one was finding what you're good at, finding what you love, and summarizing your personal brand. So in this section, we're going to look at establishing your core values to ensure that you have alignment with the career progression that you want to make. Okay. Because at the end of the day, your core values are going to be what dictates your behaviors, and your behaviors are going to drive your actions and your decisions. So, if in the last exercise you find that you might have created this identity that doesn't really feel like you, that's an important thing to note. And it's important to make some changes to really align it with your true core values and your behaviors. Because if you're always trying to fit into a box that, isn't you and doesn't feel comfortable, there's going to be some dissonance there, and you're going to struggle, and it's going to show when you try to connect with other people. Okay. So number one, identify core values. What are some words that come to when I think of this? Well, for me, it's integrity, reliability, teamwork. What are your hard stops, and what is important to you that other people perceive as important to you? Okay. Number two, consistency is key. Again, your core values, they're going to dictate your behaviors. So if you act in an inconsistent manner, both with yourself and when you're dealing with other people, that is not conducive to building trust and building relationships. Just picture somebody that you might have experienced in your life where every time you run into them, it's a different mood, it's a different approach. You don't know what to expect when you go to talk to them, if you're going to get yelled at, if they're going to crack a joke. You're a little bit apprehensive and you're a little more timid to connect with that person. Same thing with decision making. If you're consistently making a certain set of decisions and then one day you start acting differently, people are going to say, okay, well, this is kind of weird. So it's important to be consistent to help build those relationships and to feel comfortable doing these exercises. So again, refer to your workbook, write these down, compare how your core values list to how you wanted it to be perceived in the last section, and make sure there's a bit of alignment there. Also important is setting boundaries. So in addition to core values, things that you want to represent, things that you want to stand for, and qualities that you want to emulate, it's also important to know your no-go zones or your boundaries. Know your limits and hard stops, because we operate best when we're within our boundaries and our quote unquote safe spaces. You want to feel a little uncomfortable and be pushed a little bit, but if there's something that's really important to you to set as a boundary, and once you cross it, it's going to take you out of your element and start detracting from your character and the steps you're trying to make. It's important to identify those and to avoid them. One of the hardest things to learn especially in construction, because it's a very demanding industry, is learning to say no. There's a way to say no without swearing or being rude or impolite or coming off as, lazy. Okay? You can always explain your reasons for doing it. It's perfectly fine to say no. It's important to, protect yourself in that regard, because there's a lot of people out there who will take advantage and walk all over you if you don't. So very important here. Again, it's all in the workbook. Make sure you write it down. So now that we have an idea of your personal brand, what you're good at, your core values, we're really starting to develop something that we can package up into what we're calling your unique selling proposition. So this is basically, some people might call it an elevator pitch or an avatar, but it's basically you summed up, written down, in something that you could theoretically package and sell to somebody, which ultimately that's what we're doing here, right? It's people think sales is usually a dirty word because you think of a used car salesman or you think of snake oil salesman. I hate to break it to you, but if you're dealing with people in any capacity, you are a salesperson. Okay, you're not necessarily selling a product or a service. You may be, but you're always selling yourself. You're selling your ideas. You're selling your offering as a tradesperson or as a project coordinator or as a project manager. So it's important to look at it as a unique selling proposition. So what we can do to build this, we can kind of put everything together we've talked to this point. You can you can curate a portfolio of projects, skills, achievements, and certifications. So, if you're a red seal trade, that's an obvious one. If you're in the project management side and you have your PMP or your PEng, if you have an engineering background, all that stuff is important. Any certificates, any training you've taken, even if it's something silly like basics of supervision or confined space, that is an important part because it's training that you've done. And a lot of times you get a piece of paper at the end of the day. People love pieces of paper. If you can get letters added to your name, that's an extra bonus. The second part of this is what sets you apart. Okay, so identify your unique strengths. Especially when you look at the last point, you might think, well, the last project I was on, there were 500 other guys. Or everybody has a PMP, or there's tons of people with the PEng, or a lot of people did supervision. That might be so, but not many people have the unique combination of experience that you have. That's why it's important to list everything out, because especially when you're talking to somebody, whether it's a manager, a supervisor, or a coworker, and you get to talking about your experience in different things and different combinations, they might think of potential opportunities for you. So it's important to know everything and when to share it with people. And lastly, the value proposition is basically how does your brand benefit others? We're going to dive a little deeper into this in the following section, but essentially, what solution are you providing to the problem and how are you the best fit for that role or that opportunity or that position? Lastly, and probably most importantly, part of this section is to take care of yourself. Okay. So construction is hard work, and building your brand and carving out a niche can be especially hard because a lot of this stuff isn't talked about and definitely not trained in construction. And burnout is real. It happened. It's happened to me multiple times. It's happened to basically everybody I've talked to. It's really important to be realistic with what you can do, both with this exercise and even, physical labor, mental labor on site. Just know your boundaries and stay within them. Okay, that's an important part of a previous slide where we talked about knowing your hard stops, knowing your boundaries. Okay, a lot of times, and again we mentioned this in the last slide, it's hard to say no, right? People keep piling on work, and usually the reward for doing a good job is more work. So It's hard to say no. It's hard to turn things down, especially if you're earlier on in your career. But if you end up taking on too much, you're either going to fail because it's just there's only so much one person can do, or you're going to work so hard, you're going to be working nonstop. It's going to be on your mind even when you go to bed at night or wake up in the morning, and you're going to get burnt out, and that's going to affect your productivity and your mood and all this other stuff. Okay, so it's important to know your limits. We mentioned that construction is it can be a difficult industry with difficult personalities. There's a lot of deadlines and money and all this stuff involved. It's important to learn healthy ways of coping because you can't avoid the stress. You're going to face it. So you need to find healthy ways of dealing with it. Okay. Just some examples that work for some people. I mean, for me personally, I love playing music, listening to music. I like creating content. I like spending time outside, spending time with my family, playing with my kids, going to the gym. There's a whole bunch of stuff. These may or may not work for you, but explore different things and see what works for you to help de-stress, because it's easy to fall into vices, which is another interesting point, and what is characterized with a lot of construction type workers is substance misuse and other things like that, where you could get into trouble. So it's important to identify um, healthy ways of dealing with that. So this section of the course was really about focusing on yourself, coming up with the foundation of you as a person, and where you're at in your career now and where you want to be. And it's going to set the stage for the next module, where we're going to look at some techniques on how to uh, connect with people and start to build relationships using the information that we just accumulated. So take some time, take a few minutes, pause at the end of this module, have a look at the workbook, answer the questions, fill it out, and we'll see you over in module 2.